Hey, everybody.
You guys hear us okay? Okay, cool.
Cool, cool. I'm Aaron. That's John.
Nice to meet you all.
Welcome. We're going to talk to you about events and devices.
Oh my.
Oh, my. We do really want to thank all our sponsors for this event. As has been said by everybody, without these sponsors, this wouldn't happen. I know you visited them. Check them out. Make sure they know you're around. So, about me. Aaron Steele. I don't have a picture in my gal, so I don't put a picture on my slides. I'll turn on my camera anytime you want. Talk to you about it, anything you want. I've been doing this IT stuff for 20-ish years. Hey, Pat, this monitor's not live. Been at Microsoft for a little over 12 years now. I've worked with Teams since its inception. I've been around doing Skype meeting broadcasts, doing live broadcasts, doing events, doing anything under the sun. In my spare and free time, I hang out with my family, I bake bread, and I walk my standard poodle 2 to 3 miles a day. And as I note here, I'm an itinerant tinkerer. I play with stuff. I take stuff apart. I've been doing it since I could, hold a screwdriver.
Same. All right, I'm John Moore. I'm a enterprise architect at Ernst & Young, and I do architecture and strategy for our collaboration solutions and our event space at EY. I've been there for about a year, but I've been in end-user technology all up for about 15 years. Started out, maybe ironically, as the Mac guy. So I did Mac management my first couple years, moved to VDI, and that got me into file sharing, which kind of got me in through OneDrive. So I'm a Microsoft 365 guy by way of file sharing and collaboration. I'm a 3 times MVP, hopefully 4 times. We'll see this coming summer in apps and services for M365. And outside of work, I've got a few interests. I like technology, even though I'm not working on it. So it kind of leads me to like taking things apart, like you said, a tinkerer. I like to go find like retro game systems and refurbish them and mod them with like newest screens and new modern parts, things like that. And I would call myself also a maker on the side. So I'm into like laser cutting and CNC and everything. And fun fact about me, my wife and I own a wood shop back in Kansas City called Fountain City Wood Shop that we run out of our basement. And yeah, it's nice whenever you do something in your brain all day to then switch to doing something with your hands for the evening. So it's a lot of fun doing that. And then there's my socials. If you download the slides after this, you can come connect with me over there.
Yeah, I got mine on here too.
Yeah, you're on Mastodon. I got a placeholder for Mastodon, but I haven't used it yet.
You can find me on Twitter. I don't sign into it.
Yeah, I don't really do much
Anyway,
anymore.
So our agenda here, we're going to cover a few things about this. We have to set the stage a little bit with the roles and responsibilities. We'll talk a little bit about a run-a-show playbook, because when you start adding devices into your events to make your event production better, it adds that level of complexity, which necessitates things like a run book. We're going to talk about your hardware options. As we talk about those, they're your old school SDI networking technology for video transit over a physical cable. Then we start talking about NDI. NDI is that new school game where everything's just going across your LAN. Finally, we get to that big brain guy for somebody who wants to work cloud native, who wants to interact at that level, and they live in the broadcast development kit and everything that brings into the game. Then we'll talk a little bit about the third-party options you've got, what other add-ons you can bring into this game, and then John's got a little show and tell around what his kit that we've got up here that people can come look at, ask us questions about. We'll try and have some time at the end for questions.
Yep. And while we won't be giving away anything in my personal kit, we are going to be giving away an ATEM Mini Pro to somebody here today as well. So stick around for Q&A, and we'll give that out.
So, roles and responsibilities. the reality is when you're putting on an event, you don't want to do what John does, where John's the presenter and the producer and running the Q&A and creating the slides and running the video and doing the lower thirds and.
It's like that guy with like the gif of playing the piano and he's like pulling things and doing everything at once. It's very like Twitch style where you see how things are going because you got to just put it all on screen and put it out there. You know, you don't want to be doing that for your like leadership keynotes for sure.
Yep. So you bring in this role to an event called a producer. It takes the need to produce the content away from your presenters. It lets your presenters do what they need to do, be the smiling face of talent. Consider them talent. Don't consider them anymore the people running the show. They're there to share the information you need to get out. And it's better for them, for your audience, and for everybody involved when they don't have to think about what's going on screen. And you've got that figured out, and you can share it with them, right? Moderators are important. If you're going to have Q&A in your session, make sure you've got somebody to answer those questions. It often gets forgot about in these shows, where you get your C-level who says, I want to run a town hall and I want to answer questions at the end. Mm-hmm. And then there's 600 questions in the queue at the end and nobody knows what to do with them. Think about your moderators. And truly, the whole point of bringing these devices in is to give your attendees a better experience, a more compelling scene, more information, the proper information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as we think about structuring the live event process, once you get to the next level, like beyond just the out-of-the-box Teams live event basics, where you're doing everything inside of Teams, if you want to take it to the next level, as Aaron mentioned, it requires a little bit of more planning than what a typical, your first couple times doing an event. And I like to think about it in three main phases as you're planning out the phases of your event. The first is before the event, before, during, and after, really. As you're planning the event, you want to start to figure out like what your goals are out of this. That will help settle you on your platform. You need to decide if you're going to run it in Teams. Is it going to be, consumed via Microsoft Teams or consumed via Yammer? Or is it like an external marketing event that you're going to use on social media? Is it going to be LinkedIn, YouTube, things like that? And you're going to use Teams as the vehicle, right? So is it the destination or is it how you're getting the content out there? Once you land on, well, maybe we're going to do this inside of Teams, then you start thinking through what you want to get as far as interactivity, right? Do I want to have a meeting, a webinar, or a live event? And if you start to think about that, the way I think about it in my mind is in the meeting space, that's interactive. It's a two-way discussion, right? You can allow people to unmute, they can talk back. It's not just broadcasting out and having a very moderated Q&A. And when it comes to meetings versus webinars, the way I decide in my mind is, am I pushing this out or am I going to try to market it and pull people in? If it's a meeting, you're sending an invite out via Outlook, and it's like the VP is inviting everybody to this all-hands meeting. You're pretty much expected to be there, right? So that's a push mechanism. If I want to talk about what's new and exciting in Yammer or something like that, I want to put it out there and advertise it, and I want to draw people in. That's a webinar in my mind because I'm inviting people to sign up and add it to their calendar that way. So that's how I personally decide between meeting or webinar. And if it's a large enough audience that I worry about like managing the mute and cameras and all that type of stuff, and I don't really necessarily want them to see access to the whole chat, stuff like that, that's whenever it scales up to a live event for my mind. So decide what style of communication you're doing, what you need to get out of it. And then, as Aaron mentioned, you have those roles. Assign out the roles right off the bat. You've got your producer, your moderator, your presenters. Ideally, those are 3 separate people at least. You don't have anybody sharing jobs. Another tip that wasn't mentioned is have more than one producer, especially if it's at all important. A little story, I was teaching a class it was about 1,800 people were going to show up to it online. It was like a SharePoint 101 class. And the lady from our comms group that scheduled it, she went into labor the day of the class, and none of us could start the live event because I was the presenter this time. I wasn't the producer. So I had to reschedule it, send out a new link, and all of that. So it's helpful to have more than one producer because blizzards happen, babies get born, things like that. So, have more than one way to actually start the event.
Somebody might get hit by the lottery bus.
Exactly, right? Yeah, that's what I like to say is like, whenever you're planning redundancy, it's never like, what if somebody gets hit by a bus? I always like to say, what if somebody wins the lottery and they don't work here anymore? And finally, for your event, if you can get away with this, it kind of depends on the culture of your organization. Try to hold a tech check if at all possible. Microsoft does this every time I've been on screen for like Ignite or something like that. It's not optional. If you're going to be in a Microsoft event, you're going to attend the tech check. You're going to make sure that your camera works and your lighting, because they'll help you like position. Hey, you've got a fern growing out of your head. Can you like go move that in the background? You can kind of stage that stuff so that the VP, they might not like it and they think that they're just going to show up and talk, but they will appreciate it if you like save them from some type of embarrassment in the future. So I know it's hard, especially with executives, but if you can hold a tech check, that's pretty nice. Then during your event, some advice that I have is start well and end well. I still see this today in an organization of over 400,000 people. We've got Teams live events turned on. Normal people are running live events, and you show up, and some of these are kind of like large scale, or what I would consider large scale, and it's like 1 minute until, and it's just this live event will start soon, and there's nothing going on, and you never really know if they're going to start on time. So whenever you add that little bit of extra polish, that's when you start thinking about ending well and starting well. My recommendation is to start at least 5 to 10 minutes early and have some type of like music playing or some type of audio, and to have something moving on screen. Like Pat, he was telling me they've got an animated background for the super source. So when you're looking at it, you don't think it's frozen. So I like to have something moving and something audible, because that answers like the basic questions right off the bat of, can anybody else hear? Or is anybody else, is it frozen for anybody? If you've got that, you don't have to answer that question 100 times in the chat. The nice thing, as Aaron was talking about, whenever you split out your producer from your moderator, from your presenter, the nice benefit of that is the presenter just shows up and they only have to worry about their content, right? So my kit that I'll go over here, it's designed in such a way that the presenter can walk up. They don't have to know anything that I'm doing. I just clip a microphone onto their shirt, and then they plug their laptop in with one cable that works for everything. It takes a lot of the stress out of it if they don't have to worry about if people can hear them, or if they look okay, or if they're in frame, because that's somebody else's job. And then use the back channel chat. That's really helpful for moderating your Q&A. This is one way where you might want to split the meeting where you're hosting everybody and using NDI or something separate from the live event production and the output, because then you can use that back channel to kind of say, hey, you've only got 5 minutes left, or there's a really good question coming in. You can kind of figure out like what the next step is, especially if things start to go off the rails. And then finishing well, following through on that swing. After your event, you're not just done. A lot of people are just done. But the most frustrating thing for me as somebody who attends an event is you give feedback. They ask you for a survey, right? Of like, did this go? What was your favorite part? Do you have any questions? And then you never get any follow-up. So I try to champion that.
And the next event isn't any different.
Yeah, I try to champion that internally, that like, we do not publish surveys unless we're going to output that in some way, right? To say, hey, we know you guys are interested in Copilot. How do you want to use it? We're going to take that and we're going to present it back as a word cloud, or we're going to tell you what we're going to do about it, and we put like a deadline on it. So process that feedback, export the Q&A, but more importantly, follow up with those people so that they feel like they were heard, it just didn't go out into a vacuum. Publish the content as soon as possible. What I typically like to do is like within 24 to 48 hours, I want to get that available on demand. Whenever it comes to a normal Teams Live event or a basic Teams Live event, you can just have it on demand right away, and the same link takes you to the recording. But if you're publishing that like on a SharePoint page, it's going to go into like an archive library of this executive's keynote speeches, then you want to publish that as soon as possible and get that recap out to people before they forget about it, because the iron's kind of hot at that point. And then finally, schedule your next event and take that momentum into planning the next one. Don't just have nobody hear about anything for another quarter, and then all of a sudden it's time for the town hall again. Like, take that output and create a narrative that you keep coming back to so you can keep your community engaged, because from my perspective, this is about building a community and keeping the conversation going. So that's some of the basics or some things to think about before we talk about the fun, nerdy stuff. Oh, I'm getting hotter in my microphone.
Yeah.
That's the weirdest thing. I was telling Aaron before this, like, I think the weirdest thing about coming back in person is hearing myself, because I've just done like virtual events for 3 or 4 years now, and you never hear yourself, and it's like it trips you out a little bit. So, but we'll get through it. Hardware options. So that kind of like level one of the big brain idea is a lot of people, we started out with Teams Live events, and they were really, really niche before the pandemic. In the before times, like maybe you had somebody do a Teams Live event where it was all based inside of Microsoft Teams. They're maybe using their camera, hopefully, if you can get them to. And then when we went into lockdown, everybody started geeking out about all of the stuff that people were talking about on YouTube for years and years already, and the niche became the mainstream. So you may already be past this point, but kind of stage one of taking your event to the next level is using hardware that's available, like upgrading your camera to something that uses a capture card, or getting like a better lens, better lighting, better microphone, that type of stuff. Some options that are up here using a camera input to kind of upgrade the visuals are capture cards. I've got one down here, and Aaron has one in his backpack. I use the Elgato capture card. He's got a Magewell. Personally, what I'll say about this is I own all Elgato stuff at my house where it stays. But if you're going to be like enterprise grade, moving it around, plugging and unplugging, I've worn out an Elgato device. I've never worn out one of these Magewells. So it's like 3 times more expensive, but it's in a metal case. It's more resilient. We'll talk about the kit in a little bit, but if you're going to be handing this to other people who are going to like throw it into a box without even unplugging stuff, you might not want the plastic version. And then a lot of people, we got geeked out about the A10 Mini. That's another option that you have where you scale up even more, where you can take some of the processing power away from your computer even, and you can stream directly from this box into your Teams RTMP, your Yammer or Viva Engage RTMP, or to YouTube, those other things. You can use multi-streaming platforms and all that cool stuff. It allows you to kind of grow into it, because you could start with just treating this as basically like a webcam and get a multicam view, bring in the laptop, that cool stuff, but then you can graduate to streaming directly from it if you want to. So it gives you a little bit of headroom. A lot of us still use OBS virtual camera. I kind of went away from it personally, but that allows you to get, now you're bringing graphics on screen, so you can add a lower third, you can have it animate away, you can use that to bring in video and sources like that as well, kind of do a split screen, get like a panel going, stuff like that. And then Microsoft, what was it, it was before the pandemic that they brought out hardware SDI and HDMI support.
No, it
available.
was since pandemic. NDI came first, hardware out came about a year after.
Yeah, I thought it was like right during, because I remember
NDI was before NDI was definitely before the pandemic, but the hardware out was during.
Yeah, during the pandemic. So what's cool about this is like a hardware out is it allows you to use Teams as the delivery mechanism. So maybe you've got a large event production team and you use like TriCasters or you use like Epiphan Pearl products, something like that. You could basically use Teams as the delivery mechanism to bring in your remote presenters. And with this feature, Aaron will talk a little bit about NDI and slinging video over the network. This gives you the ability to right-click on the people and say send to video out or video hardware. And there's one or two options from Blackmagic, the Ultra Studio and the Deck Link, that you could put into a desktop computer, or this external one just plugs in over USB. And that gives you output not only over HDMI, so you can put it into like a video switcher, but also SDI. Pat and I were talking in the back earlier. What SDI gives you is a bit more reliable connection, especially over a long run. With HDMI, you start to lose signal and you got to get very expensive cables. With SDI, you can run from the stage back to there, and it's a locking connector, so somebody won't trip over it and pull the plug out, something like that. So getting to SDI is getting a little bit more professional grade from what you've been doing with your ATEMs.
Yeah, traditional SDI is sort of the bread and butter of broadcast. SDI and IP video are what gets used at NBC, right? It's what they live on, right? So when you can integrate Teams into something like that with a little hardware card, you've now made it so you can put people from anywhere you want.
And get very high quality in the process, a dedicated video feed for those people. So,
yeah, the options are really sort of endless. We've just listed a few of the partners and products that are out there. There's lots more.
Yeah. So, tell me why I need Teams Premium, Aaron.
So the reality is you do and you don't. Depends on who needs what. The reality is we give in Teams at just your E-star SKU a great set of features that will let you do event production. You get NDI. You get isolated audio. Isolated audio is key to a lot of these productions. Normal meetings, you may not have thought about this, but there's one audio feed coming out of that meeting, and it's everybody mixed. Once you start doing things where you've got individual video feeds for people, you may want to be able to mute the guy who's talking too much, right? That's what isolated audio on your NDI feed gives you.
That was a godsend for me. Whenever that feature finally came out, I've got one of the first videos on YouTube about how to use NDI in Microsoft Teams, and I kid you not, at least 3 comments a day that were like, I'm getting this horrible echo, what's going on? And I have to answer at the same time, like, you got to mute everybody except for one person in OBS, and then, you know, the Aarons brought this out, and I was able to, you know, not have to answer that question 1,000 times a month.
Right.
So
then we get into RTMP. So RTMP is real-time media protocol. It is the industry standard today for streaming content into delivery platforms. Delivery platforms being YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and on down the list. RTMP is what gets used. SRT is coming. We don't support SRT yet. SRT is coming. RTMP is there. What RTMP out lets you do, if you got, as an example, you're working with a company that uses Facebook Workplace, this lets you hold an event in Teams and broadcast that content out to your users who are in Facebook Workplace. So they can attend the stream in the platform you want them to be working in. Right? You can do the same thing, RTMP out from a meeting into other sources, into another meeting, you can chain these things down. And then we've been able to do RTMP in a live event for a long time, but that was really based on our stream acquisition and our stream customers. We've recently replaced that with a new set of infrastructure that is our native RTMP in for Teams live events. Now you get into why premium. This is just a tiny set of the things that premium gives you in that Teams premium license. You add in to RTMP in for your live events, you can now take that mixed source coming out of that box there into a meeting as the video source. So if you've got 3 cameras in a location, you've got a presentation on disk, you've got a video you want to play, you no longer need a computer that's doing that work that could crash, that could have an update, that could have a Teams crash, that could do all those things. You're just streaming that directly into the meeting, and somebody in that other meeting is pinning it, and it's gone.
Yeah. If you want to play video in a meeting and have good audio experience, RTMP is what you're going to need to use.
Yep. Then we get Green Room. Green Room is that pre-step that John was talking about, where when you as an attendee join that meeting, you get a little notice the meeting hasn't started yet. But we do that for meetings, not just live events. That's what Green Room gives you. Managing the attendee view, we sometimes call this managed mode. This managed mode really lets you choose who is on screen independent of who has turned their camera on. Normal Teams meeting, if you turn your camera on and come off mute, you're on screen for everybody. With managed mode, there's a decision being made that's controlling that view for the attendees. Who's on screen, who's pinned, who's available. It's a really useful feature around the scenario of a town hall with Q&A, because it enables this scenario of I can have my managed view of my presenters speaking in my town hall, and then when somebody wants to come off mute, they can raise their hand, they get brought onto the stage, we do a little video check, and then we present them to the audience, and they can ask their question live. All of that gets enabled by managed mode.
I've literally had, during a meeting that should have been a live event, somebody joined from their Peloton on their phone, and they were like literally riding and sweating with their camera on, and they were on screen for everybody to see. So managed mode prevents that type of thing.
Then we get meeting backgrounds. So this is, you want a custom set of meeting backgrounds in your meeting, not people's backgrounds, but the background for the meeting. You want it to look like your enterprise. That's what meeting backgrounds give you. Same thing you can do with managing people's together mode scenes. So as we know, together mode was a thing we released during early part of the pandemic that let 50 people be on stage all at once in a virtual seating arena. With Teams Premium, you get the ability to have a managed set of together mode seats for your enterprise. First-party ECDN. One of the big things we hear from customers when they start doing live events is it kills their network, right? A live event attendee streaming that content straight from us will consume about 1.7 megabit. Times that by how many people are in a single site in your office. Nobody has that kind of bandwidth. I'm sorry, they just don't. ECDN is what lets you have that to protect your internal network from a lot of people in a single location connecting to that streamed meeting. We acquired a company called Pier 5. We built off their technology and have released that technology for internal ECDN as our first-party ECDN services. That also comes with your premium feature. Then we get into webinar. It lets you have a wait list for your webinar registration. So you can have 1,000 people register for a webinar, and you can have up to another 1,000 people in your wait list. So maybe you need to have a second session. That's not me. That thing shut down. That thing rebooted again. Maybe I shocked it. So wait list. End-to-end encryption. This is one we hear from a lot of customers. I will say nobody, and I truly mean nobody, can do end-to-end encryption in a limitless meeting. There will inherently be limits to what you can do when you want to have end-to-end encryption in that meeting. Things like recording, translation, transcription. Those things don't get to be a part of an end-to-end encrypted meeting. Because once you bring something else in, well, then it's not end-to-end encrypted, is it? Right? And finally, control who can record. So this is the ability to have a different setting than just anybody who's coming into this meeting can record it. And as I say, there's a ton more Teams Premium features out there that I didn't cover. This is just a lot of the ones that I thought were important for people to see around event production, right? That'll simplify and sort of unify what you're trying to do in an event using some of these features to put on an event inside of Teams that's a little more compelling.
Yep. So as we look at like third-party options and other ways to kind of take control end to end of your event, I think you have to make a decision about at what point are some of these things just too much overhead, right? Whenever you go into like your own encoder using OBS, you reach some point of like diminishing returns, right? Where the reliability becomes like a factor, or the hardware that you're running becomes a factor, something like that. And a lot of the premium features that you see coming out now is the beginning of what I think is going to be a trend over the next quarters or years from Microsoft, where I think the things that we've gone to external encoders for, we're going to probably not have to go to those external encoders anymore. Like the traditional one, to put a feature request in right now, I guess. The traditional one has been I want to have a Q&A panel in my live event, and I want the 3 executives on screen, and like you got to go out to an external encoder. Hopefully over time, we'll see some of those types of options come in. So if I could ask for something in live events, being able to throw multiple faces, not in a managed mode meeting, but in a true live event, would be another one of those nail in the coffin of like using OBS. So I hope that it's the beginning of a trend that like more and more features get added to premium that will help you out and make it so that you don't go to these other things that maybe you even have to pay extra for to get like I want to be able to put something that way, so I got to have another subscription model. So it's definitely a space to watch. I'm excited to figure out what that point is for us where we go over to premium. But third-party options, if you want that full control, you want to be able to lay out, have that background behind it, this person's smaller than these other people. It's more than just essentially pinning the right people on screen or being able to spotlight multiple people. If you want to truly control like their aspect ratio, stuff like that, that's whenever you start looking at some options for external encoders. Kind of the classic way of doing this has been with local software. That's like OBS Studio. I run a Mac personally, so I really like something called Ecamm Live. It's kind of a Mac-y way of doing things. It kind of makes sense to my brain. A little bit easier than OBS in some places. OBS is free. It's kind of the classic way of doing it. If you download at the end of this deck, we've got a link to the Microsoft Playbook. That playbook has some information about setting up OBS specifically and bringing in NDI sources from Teams, mixing them into whatever layout you want to have, and then having that broadcast out. What I do is I kind of swing in a pendulum between very complex OBS Studio, everything's, I'm really geeked out and I'm like impressed with myself that it's like actually working, but like I have to fix something every time I want to do a live event, and if you like don't touch it every week, then something's going to be busted whenever you come back to it. So I swing the other way to where simplicity, and if you ever look at my desk, it gets like a bunch of cool equipment out with a bunch of cables, and then like 6 months later, it's like as bare minimum as possible because I want to simplify and get back to reliability. That's where for me it gets into these cloud encoders. That's your StreamYards. Cvent has one called ShowFlow. I personally, if you watch on YouTube, my friend Andy Honeycutt and I, we do deep dives on YouTube for like 2-hour live streams, very deep into Microsoft topics. We use Restream Studio for that, and I like that because it just takes a lot of the fiddliness out of like using something like OBS. So as you kind of grow into like, maybe on the other side of that bell curve where you don't like want to geek out quite as hard, you look at those cloud solutions. And then if you're thinking from an enterprise perspective that I'll talk about with the kit is duplicating your efforts and having standardization and having like rock solid reliability, then you get into real hardware encoders. And what I have experience with is the A10 Mini. You can stream directly from that. Or what I really like is one called the Epiphan Pearl family. There's the Pearl Mini, the Pearl 2. They have the Pearl Nano now. That gives you the ability to not only lay out the scene exactly what you want, bring in all of your sources, have high quality audio and video, but you're able to save that configuration and basically push it remotely to the device. So if you're giving it to somebody who's not quite as technical as you are, and they mess it up, you can just get it back to the right state. So, which is very important whenever you're talking enterprise, supportability of something.
Yeah, I will add in here the two that are at the end. If you're wanting to spend a lot of money to have a streaming platform that is rock solid, go talk to AWS about their Elemental product. They've got a cloud and an on-prem product. It's who LinkedIn uses. It's who our studios team uses,
Really?
Just for reference, right?
That's what I haven't tried
You want
yet.
the people who can stream to Ignite. That's that product, just for reference.
Yeah, that's good. I haven't used AWS Elemental. I haven't run into them yet.
Because it's 50 or 60 grand as a startup cost.
Yeah, we're not.
Huh?
We're not broadcasting the NBA or something like that.
Yeah.
So, and then finally in this space, as you look at like other options, there's a partner ecosystem that has kind of built up out of a development kit called the Broadcast Development Kit put out by Microsoft. It's out on GitHub. You can build your own, solution for this that's end to end. You spin up all kinds of like Azure VMs, and you get a lot of the encoding in the cloud and the direct connect.
Pull meeting participants in and mix them around and send them wherever you want. And
Aaron was talking about RTMP. If you want SRT, that's at the BDK. That's where you get that no latency, ridiculously fast. I tried looking at it. It was way over my head. So thank goodness a couple partners have emerged. And I've got two of them on the slide here. This gives you just a little picture of what they can do. I've done a live stream on my YouTube channel, if you'll go there later, on AI Producer, talking about that. There's two different flavors, one from Live Arena, one from Epiphan, where with Live Arena, this is more hands-off. I want to create something that I could put in the hands of end users, and it will automatically switch who's in that little box on that beautiful layout that I built. I could publish those as templates for my organization. I can have it automatically record to that person's OneDrive and live stream out and be in a Teams meeting, multiple destinations. And I want to just kind of set it and forget it. I want the artificial intelligence to tell who's on screen and be able to like frame them correctly and all of that. That's a really powerful product. It also gives you like the timers and the run of show built in, so everybody knows when they're running out of time and it's time to go on to the next section, that type of stuff. Epiphan Connect, what it's about is using Microsoft Teams as the vehicle to get somewhere else. So with Epiphan Connect, basically you use their service to host a Teams meeting. Maybe you've got 6 or 8 different people. And then with the Epiphan Connect like console or whatever they call it, portal, you're able to tag people from that meeting and pull their stream, almost like how I said you could right-click on somebody and send them to HDMI out with a Blackmagic card. With this, you can pull them, but it's SRT. So it's extremely high, low latency, high quality, full 1080p, full 30 frames per second. Very, very good, and you put it into their product or one of their hardware encoders or any encoder really that can take SRT. You can send that in and then put it together. So it's really like on one side it's hands off and it's more putting this in the end users. You want repeatability and you want reliability versus I want to give my studio team, the people who are professionals at this, I want to give them the best tools to like just pull it out of Teams and put it into whatever ridiculous TriCaster they're already using.
Right.
So.
I think of the Epiphan as it's the genie bottle you give to your producers to pull that event, out of that bottle and do whatever they want with it.
Yeah, and the other benefit of one of these partners is that your back channel that I just talked about, the moderation and being able to like, hey, your microphone's too low or you need to do this or that. That is built in because you're a Teams meeting, and the production is completely separate from that Teams meeting, and it's part of the design of those third-party options.
Mm-hmm.
So, into show and tell, a little bit of like just talking about like what I've got and what I drove here with, because I wanted to carry something heavy. In my previous role, I'm fairly new to EY, but I spent 15 years at my previous employer. When I left, we were building this thing that we were calling live events in a box, and I'm a little bit passionate about this. I believe that as IT administrators, we need to think about what the next thing is that the next generation is coming in expecting. When I started all the way back in 2008 as a bright-eyed, fresh out of college, I used Dropbox, and I expected to use Dropbox at work, right? And I came in, and there was these antiquated file shares everywhere. And I warned the people who were older than me at the time, like, people are going to use Dropbox who are coming out of college right now. And guess what? We had shadow IT where people were using Dropbox, and OneDrive didn't exist yet. And now, like, it took a little bit of a laggard, in the industry to come around. Now we have OneDrive. The next phase, or one of the phases that I have seen, is Twitch streaming, TikTok, live Instagram. People who are coming out of college expect to be able to work out loud. They expect to be able to live stream their thoughts. And if you don't give them a platform and democratize this, they're going to use Facebook Live, or they're going to use whatever. At Cerner, I caught a group that was doing their town hall events on Facebook Live because they just didn't know how to request it from the event team. And they figured the event team was too busy. So they were doing like a Facebook Live to a group that they had created. So to counteract that a little bit, we were like, okay, how can we put things into people's hands where they could go check it out, kind of like a library, and they could get access to expensive equipment they don't have to buy out of pocket. They could do their cool live event and then check it back in. And we're kind of building a community of experts that can help each other, so that I don't have to like show up with my Pelican case and run your live event, because I don't care about 35 town halls in a week. I've got my own job to do. So when we put this together at first, we looked at a few different options, and I've got what's laid out here is one of our options that we almost went with, but not quite. Basically, what we had was a laptop that's running OBS Studio, and after the session, you can come up and see this, and I can show you like how I laid everything out. If anybody's interested in like how did you do side by side and what was your background and all of that. But it was an engineering laptop with OBS Studio. We preloaded some templates and things like that. We had a Stream Deck for control, so that basically has buttons built into it to switch between the scenes. So if I lean down here, you start with the pre-show. It's got that countdown timer on it. Again, you have movement on screen. There's music playing in the background. Everybody knows when the thing is going to start. So you start with that 5 to 10 minutes early. Then we've got the side-by-side view. So you've got the camera view next to their slides, kind of like the virtual version of what we've got right here with the stage and the projector next to it. If you're having a heartfelt moment, you can go to the full camera view, come in close, let's talk about something. If it's really detailed text, you can go to a full screen. And then again, ending well, you've got like a thank you, more upbeat music. Hey, this was great. Follow us, join our community on Yammer, things like that. So we've got these different scenes that people could switch between without having to build OBS themselves and like learn with 30 hours of YouTube videos. We have a capture card down here. This is, again, that Elgato HD60S Plus. So it's a 1080p, 60 frames per second. Basically, whatever HDMI source comes in, that goes into OBS, so that's your content. And then I've got, these are fantastic little microphones. They're from Rode. It's called the Wireless Go. And what I like about these is they mount onto the camera that you've got. And this kit here, I think it was $300. It's got 2 transmitters. So if you've got 2 presenters like us, you're able to clip one onto each person with a single receiver. So I really like these. And again, they just like clip onto a shirt. It's all built in. So the idea is to just have the person walk up, clip something on, plug one thing in, and just be able to present. We had a little bit of a debate at first we started with like a fancy Sony camera. I've got my Panasonic camera that I brought, and a lot of people might be thinking like, well, why would you have a C920 Logitech camera? You know, like something that is obviously not as good as something like this that has like the depth and all that. And what we found is we initially put this in the kit and started handing that out, but then we got complaints about how bad it looked. And what we came to realize is, again, knowing your audience, knowing the person that you're putting into the hands, we found out they didn't know about white balance, they didn't know about frame rates and all that stuff, and they would mess up the settings on the camera, and then it would look like garbage. We replaced it with a $60 Logitech camera, and like all those complaints went away. Everybody was talking about how amazing it was because their frame of reference wasn't this. Their frame of reference was the laptop camera that's built in the Dell. It's in the hinge, so it's like looking up your nose. So of course this looks amazing to them, you know? And it's a little bit of a cautionary tale of knowing your audience, not putting something too technical in their hands, because otherwise you're going to be on the hook to support it all the time. What we actually ended up going with our live event in a box is, this is my friend Morris. He actually works for Microsoft now. We ended up even simplifying this because we found out, like, if these were going to sit in a box, like down in the help center, it's hard to keep Windows up to date on that if it's just like shut and turned off. People were messing up OBS. We couldn't reset it very easily. What we ended up going with, which is kind of on screen, I'm going to use the spotlight here. There it is that little gray box right there is the Pearl Mini from Epiphan. So it has a couple HDMI ports on the back, microphone inputs, things like that. You're able to just have that be the production suite. You just plug in Ethernet and stream it out to the Microsoft Teams RTMP link that gets generated. And what we liked about that was, because it was network connected and we had a template, we were able to deploy that. So if somebody messed it up, it would just reset itself back so that the next person who checked it out didn't have to deal with the garbage that they inherited from the person before them. So we really liked that setup. It simplified things a lot, where it was basically a Pelican case with that box in it, a wireless microphone, and then again this webcam, so it was not super complicated and scary to think about. So that's our live event kit in a box. Sadly, I wish I could say that it was like a huge success and we had this, process. Whenever we bought 3 of those Pearl Mini kits, they arrived at my house 2 days after COVID lockdown happened. So we never actually got to do the checkout system because we couldn't figure out a way to sanitize the boxes back in the day. Because if you remember, all the way to the beginning of the pandemic, you couldn't even get like rubbing alcohol to like wipe things down and stuff. So they sat for a couple months, and then we realized that we could deploy them in a permanent location. So what we ended up doing with them was we put them at our 3 fitness centers at the different campuses. I went in all masked up, and I set it all up, put it over to the side with the template like scene layout, pointed this at the open space and put a piece of tape on the ground. And then our fitness instructors came in by themselves for 2+ years and hosted their fitness classes live streamed through Microsoft Teams with thousands and thousands of people watching internally. And these were, I mean, if you think non-technical, like these are about as non-technical as you can get. They're the fitness instructors. They're not even like business professionals, They're very smart people for like health needs, things like that. But this looked very foreign to them. They ran it for 2 years, no problem. So it's about, again, knowing your audience, giving them something that like is within their realm of being able to run it. And I have no idea what happened to them after I left. The company got purchased by another, and I wanted to reach out and see if I could get one so I could bring it in and show you guys. But if you want to see more details about this, when you download the slide deck for this, click on that link. I built a playlist. What I used to do back in like 2018, 2019, is I would bring this kit with me. I would set it all up, and then before the event, I would take like my phone, and I would just do a walkthrough. Hey, everybody, I'm in this auditorium today. I'm doing this event. Here's who's going to be speaking. And I would just go through and just show like how everything was connected. So these are kind of behind the scenes how I did live events. I've got, I don't know, like a dozen or so. So you can get inspiration for equipment that's like 4 years old by now. So if we could leave you with a couple of things before we get to Q&A and give this away. Yeah, we're holding you back from lunch. If you haven't done anything at all, my recommendation is to start playing with OBS. It's completely free. It's not going to hurt anything. When you download OBS, be sure to get something called the OBS-NDI plugin, and that gives you the ability to connect Teams to OBS and bring your people from Teams in. Again, I've got a video about that. It uses little Mario characters to put people on screen. That's the way that you can like experiment and kind of play with this stuff. And as my recommendation, don't try to be perfect right off the bat. You know, whenever you are doing this, try to tweak one small thing at a time. Don't try to change too many things for your next event, because if something goes wrong, you won't know which change it was that messed it up. So only fix one thing at a time. And then, yeah, let us know what you're doing. I'm really interested to see cool layouts if people are like on the move. I don't get to do this as much in my day job anymore.
Right.
So both of us are really interested in cool things you're doing. So
yeah,
be sure to tag
I
us.
rarely get to talk to customers anymore, except when I come to events like this. So
Yeah.
please do. If you go out there and this inspires you to put some devices in and really up your game for an event, tell us about it. Tag us on it. Show us some pictures. Show us the great things you create.
Yep. Yep. And some resources to leave you with as well. We've got some best practices
Caruana
from
and their
Microsoft.
team's playbook
Yeah.
here. We've linked that
Caruana
in.
put together a beautiful playbook that is the actual step-by-step what to do. Be sure to download that. It's what, like 60 pages of just gold, you know, from Microsoft. So be sure to do that. And
Yes.
yeah. Yes. 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 So what Caruana said for those for the recording later on, if you're interested in this stuff, go join the live events community on. It's a hub within techcommunity.com. Go there, join that, and there's actually a badge where you can upskill and you can get a credential to add to your LinkedIn that can help you, you know, break into a career in this area. So definitely go do that, join the community, and share there as well. So,
Last.
any questions?
Any questions?
Before we
Is that a
figure
hand
out
or a
how
yawn?
to give this away?
Okay. Do we need the mic?
Oh, yeah, do we want to throw the cube?
Okay,
Yeah, we just
go
repeat
ahead.
it. Yeah. So the question was about like OBS and vMix and Ecamm Live. What do you use when? For me personally, I started out with OBS Studio just because it's free. And I really liked it. It's open source. I learned about it actually from Mark Moraz at Microsoft. Like, I went to a Microsoft Stream session. They told me about this thing called OBS. I downloaded it, and I played with it on the plane on the way back, and it changed my career. You know, so big kudos to Mark Moraz to inspire me with that years ago. I like that, and it's very nerdy and geeky. But a lot of like professionals,
And
if you need like,
ridiculously powerful.
yeah, it is really, really powerful. But if you're in an enterprise and you need like vendor support, that's whenever I personally say, let's start looking at something like vMix. That's what like kind of the professionals use for like local encoding, because you can get like support contracts and you can.
Right.
You know,
Somebody to call when vMix doesn't
you
run.
can get business agreements signed, you know, because there's an entity behind that.
Yep.
With OBS, it's an open broadcasting software. You're not going to get, you know, there's nobody who owns OBS who can sign an NDA with an enterprise.
Right.
You know, so
And
that's one thing.
totally. The reality of OBS, if your favorite Twitch streamer isn't using it, they're using one of those.
Yeah.
Or something smaller.
Yeah, OBS, there's a huge community out there, so you can find an enormous amount of information, way more than you'll ever be able to consume, about OBS. vMix, it's a little bit more like, you know, in the club. You know,
Yeah,
professionals kind of know about it. I think
Yep.
you can take like legit classes that you pay for
Yep.
when you get into that world. Ecamm Live is basically kind of the Mac equivalent, but it speaks more of a Mac design language, where I'm a Mac user as a Microsoft MVP. I don't know how loud I should say that, but I am like I've always been a Mac user, so it kind of speaks my language more. Yeah, so that's why I like Ecamm personally. But it's like $40 a month, so it's nothing to sneeze at, especially if you're like me and you're doing it on your own.
So we'll see if this works. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Any tips on the hybrid experience for live events and multi-locations and kind of handling that scenario?
It's very doable, right? So multi-locations, your key there is, it's in the BDK, it's in the playbook. It is really about custom production, right? You're going to effectively separate and have meeting A that brings all your remote people together, and meeting B gets used to stream that to all the attendees wherever they are and facilitate things and make those bridges. The complication comes, how do you make that bridge to get the Q&A in? How do you make those plans to get that? I tend to say, once you're doing that, that's where moderators and proxies help, and that's where you can use things like streaming it on Yammer in your enterprise, and using Yammer as your question platform and having your moderators be able to monitor the questions in there, because they don't need to be in the meeting. But they can be in the meeting to proxy.
Yeah, so like level 1 is just using like Teams live events as it's designed and getting all your people in and using the layouts that are available to you, all 2 of them. But level 2 is whenever you get into NDI. And what we do at my enterprise is we have studios, right, that have like great network connection. They've got their own event network. They're calling using the Teams meeting on the side on a separate device, pulling it out over NDI or the HDMI, SDI output into a big hardware encoder. Step 3 is that cloud stuff I talked about where you get like Epiphan Connect or something like that. And that's where you graduate from NDI to SRT, and you get like, I can't say lossless, but you get like as close as possible to like them streaming it directly to the output.
And so if you are in a scenario like this where we have attendees and the presenters in the same space and you have multiple spaces, you're going to be going to the custom production route.
Yeah, usually you're doing custom production. For an event like this where it's hybrid, I would personally probably use NDI. That way I could bring them on screen using the projector, have the remote person, and stitch the remote person, the content, and the stage camera for the live stream portion. I could get all 3 of them, but I could get 2 of them on screen or in person because we're physical. We don't need to be on camera.
Can you hear me now? Are any of these solutions working with 4K?
Teams doesn't work in 4K.
Any update on that?
I don't break NDAs.
Okay.
Yeah. We always want to make the quality higher.
Marijuana that we were talking about earlier?
Teams isn't 4K. Heck, live events are 720p for the attendees. Right?
Yeah.
So, any other questions?
Hopefully in the future.
Okay. Which one of you 3 wants this thing and wants to carry it home? Who doesn't have one? Who do you think gets it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the first question, yeah. Thanks for jumping in and breaking the ice to ask a question.
Thanks, everybody. Please
you,
do your
guys.
surveys and enjoy lunch.
Yes, and if you want to connect with us, there's our information again. So, thanks, guys.